Hey guy. So these needs are so close. I mean, you can buy either one. I'm just figuring you want it a little simpler, but it's sort of half a dozen of one, six of the other kind of thing. Now I use the 1073 because I love the sound of the preamp, which is identical. The preamps are the same. Now in the hardware they might be slightly different, but from UAD told me directly that no, it's the same programming for the Unison preamp here. The 1073 EQ looks like this. I'll just go through the differences. Volume, gain, exactly the same on both. The high end on the 1073 is there's no frequencies to choose from. It's a 12 kilohertz frequency. Whereas this one you can switch it from 10 to 12 or 16. 12 is the more useful frequency. So that's why they chose it. It's the more, it's more like, oh, I just want to add some high end. 10 is a little bit gnarly and weird, and 16 is way up high in just like adding air to something like cymbals or, an overall mix adjustment. So you can switch between three frequencies and then turn the gain up with this or down. This, again, is just stuck at 12. The mid-range bands are the same, except this one has a high quotient. So if you turn that on, you could hunt for frequency and it would be a very narrow bandwidth. If you were like, you were looking around for something to cut or whatever that was very, you needed to pinpoint it, you turn that on for a second and then you find the frequency and then turn it off to make it a sweeter sound and then turn it up or down. This one has all the same frequencies. Everything's the same except it doesn't have the high quotient button. Um, I don't really use neve EQs to carve into stuff. I usually add stuff because they sound nice. Like the the EQ actually sounds nice. You'll cut some things or whatever. The low band frequency, let's see here, exactly the same. The same. This is a filter. On the 1073, it's just a low end filter, so you can cut off 50 hertz way down low, 80, 160, I think it says, 300. So those are your choices. This one is roughly the same. The frequencies are a little different on the low, like it goes to 360, this one. But this one has a high frequency roll off if you wanted that. So those are the main differences. You get the high frequency roll off, a high quotient button for the mids, and three frequencies on the high end band. So this one's a little simpler. I want to add some high end. There you go. I want to cut or boost this mid frequency. Great. Take off something. Take a little bit of low end off. Go for it. Now the reason I didn't bother with the 1084 is I own the 1081 EQ, which is even more. It's got more to it than this. So it's having these two for me is better than having this. So why buy it? I don't need it. This one has so the EQ goes high, high mid, low mid, bass, filter. This one has I can turn this from a shelf EQ to a bell curve if I want by clicking that on both the high and low end bands. So normally they're shelving EQs, but this turns it into a bell curve, like a little hump. And then you've got a high quotient for both mid frequency bands. In fact, these don't come with the lower mid frequency band, whereas this splits it off into two high and low mids. So this is if you want an EQ for mixing, I would get the 1081 and then just use the 1083. But if you want to just get this, you'll have a little bit more to the EQ if you're going to get in there and carving EQ stuff. I will say, if you're recording a saxophone or a vocal or whatever, chances are you want this flat. You don't even engage this. That's how you turn on the EQ. Don't even engage it. Use a good mic, and this neve will sound beautiful. You don't need to. Now, if you're doing drum sounds, you might have a little high end on your snare. It's a little bit more, you know, drum sounds are a little bit more tricky, and you might want to go to tape and correct some problems on the way. That's why, you know, you might EQ. But most of the stuff can be done afterwards. Anyways, that's all I would say about that. So if they're the same price, you get a little bit more, I guess, with the 1084. But I would suggest this combination if you're really going to be EQing. If you're like, man, I'm not going to EQ much, then just get the Neve 1073. You'll probably just add a little high end once in a while, or cut some lows as a filter. The mids are very, very detailed and funky. You can mess up the sound pretty quick unless you're really careful with the mid stuff. Yeah, that's about it. Okay, bye.